Welcome back again, everyone, to another episode of Friends Occasionally Not Disagreeing. This is another mini special episode. This is Cody, and I'm here by myself today. Won't have anybody to bounce opinions and ratings off of today, but I just wanted to review a show that I finished in the last week or so. This is on Netflix, and it is called Midnight Mass. I had seen a preview for this show that just featured a girl in a wheelchair walking alongside a priest on this seemingly kind of backward, isolated island, which we come to find out later, it's called Crockett's Island. And this is a show that is, very into religious overtones and belief and thinking about all of the things that we hold dear to us, I guess, in terms of our belief system, and then challenging those things as well as this show goes on. So that's kind of what got me into this. I had heard that there was a little bit of supernatural element to this, and I know we haven't done a ton of TV episodes here on Friends Occasionally Not Disagreeing, but I am usually famous for not being that interested in very procedural things. I generally hate things like medical dramas or fire or police dramas or that type of thing. And also not really huge on just straight up drama either. So usually either got to be comedy or something that has like a twist of our own world, some kind of supernatural element. Things like The X-Files or Lost or things like that are shows I hold near and dear to my heart through the years. And this is one that, I had just heard a little bit enough about to think there was an element of that to it. So I was intrigued to check out Midnight Mass. I'm also notoriously slow at watching TV shows. It took me about 2 years to get through Ozark. And I think it took me 3 years to get through Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. when I went back and rewatched that. And I generally don't watch TV shows by myself. My family watches a lot of shows together, especially the Marvel shows and movies and things of that nature, Star Wars shows, etc. But I generally don't have many shows I watch myself. I know my friends always speak about great shows that they're watching on all the various streaming platforms, and that's just something that I generally am not up on. I generally prefer to create content than consume content. I'm very much young at heart, I guess, when it comes to that, because they say the younger generations are more likely to create than consume. So that's kind of where I find myself often, as I'm writing a book and creating podcasts all the time and working on other things and planning parties and yada, yada, yada. Okay, so Midnight Mass on Netflix. This was great because it was only 7 episodes and they're only about an hour each. So this was a 7-hour-ish commitment, which was right on my alley. I can handle that, especially here being in the summertime and I'm on summer vacation as a teacher. It was easy for me to get these 7 episodes in. Probably still took me about 3 weeks to get 7 hours of TV in, but that's just how I spend my time. This is another, I'm gonna say here, kind of it's more drama-ish, I guess, than other offerings by the director here, and this is going to be Mike Flanigan. And Mike Flanigan has really risen to fame through the use of streaming shows on Netflix. This is the person that produced The Haunting of Hill House, which I loved, The Haunting of Bly Manor, the follow-up sequel to that, which was maybe not quite as solid as the first one, but was still enjoyable. And then he's also done a couple movies here, Gerald's Game, which is a Stephen King adaptation on Netflix, and Dr. Sleep, the sequel that was a very long time coming to The Shining, Stephen King, both Stephen King, I guess. And then also has a new show coming out soon, which is going to be called The Midnight Club, which sounds really intriguing as well. So this guy kind of gets my vibe, I think, and maybe I'm his target audience with the types of things that he produces. So this guy's also kind of known for reusing the same actors and actresses in his Netflix works. So if you were to watch like the shows I just mentioned, The Haunting of Hill House and then The Haunting of Bly Manor, you'll see a large cast overlap between the two. And even Gerald's Game featured, I forget her last name, but Carla Gargugan or something like that. Was the main star of that as well. So, and some of these people are going to pop back up here in Midnight Mass as well. So kind of an intriguing thing. It's like, I feel like American Horror Story might have kind of did this first, where they'd have a whole new concept with the same show, quote unquote, but different seasons. And people would pop back up in different roles. This is where Evan Peters and some other people kind of became famous through those things. Okay, so the one-line synopsis for this, if you were to go to IMDb, reads as follows: an isolated island community experiences miraculous events and frightening omens after the arrival of a charismatic, mysterious young priest. Yes. Ooh. So that sounds pretty cool. The setting for this show is going to be on an isolated island in the ocean. Now, I'm intrigued when shows can pull this off successfully, because even in the 80s, early 90s, you could watch a movie that was a scary movie and they could create a sense of isolation in that movie, which has become increasingly harder to pull off successfully in the advent age of technology, GPS, cell phones, ways that we can connect to each other. It's very hard to be truly isolated someplace. That being said, we know that there are places still where GPS and cell phones don't necessarily work as well in today's world. And that's kind of the case here. They pick an island in the ocean, Crockett's Island, for the setting for this TV show. And they do a fairly good job of making this seem like they are truly isolated from the world. There are phone lines. They don't always work. They have to take a ferry once or twice a day back to the mainland. They have, fishing vessels that they could take, I suppose, and try to get off this island, but that's going to come into the plot later on. Electricity on this island is kind of operated from a little central station. That's going to come into the plot later on. We have generators around the island. There's, limited gas reserves. There's limited food reserves on this place. So they do a pretty good job of making it seem like here we are in 2022, and yet somehow we could be isolated based on the world we live in today, which is hard to pull off. Another thing this setting has is a church and a school, and the church has a very large presence on the islands of St. Patrick's, and that'll be very central to our plot in this one as well. We do have some interesting characters in this show, and one of the nice things about this show is that since this is an isolated island, you have a very small cast of characters that you kind of get to know fairly well. There's, rough estimate, maybe 250 people on this island. And you do get a sense of seeing most of those people repeatedly throughout the 7 episodes. A lot of them are in all 7 episodes. So when they do bring a new character in out of nowhere in like in episode 5 or 6, it is a little jarring, just because you're like, wouldn't I have seen everybody by this point? I guess not. Some of the main characters here, and just kind of letting everybody know that this is going to be very light spoilers here today. So I'm not going to go into the finale or how this ends in any way. I'm not going to tell you more or less what happens in those last couple episodes, but it will kind of give you some tidbits that might make you intrigued to watch the show. That's kind of my goal here in reviewing this today. Because, spoiler, I did enjoy it. I'll tell you how much I did enjoy it towards the end here. Some characters in this one. We have Zach Gilford, who plays Riley Flynn, and the show kind of plays around a little bit here with who you think the main characters are as well. Riley is a former alcoholic. He actually killed someone in a drunk driving accident. He had done 4 years in jail for that on the mainland, and then he's coming back home to Crockett Island where his family lives. And this is a character who really has to wrestle with his demons, not only of alcoholism, but also of the girl that he killed when he was drunk driving, something that's certainly always on his mind. And his time in jail and that experience with alcohol and the accident are definitely events that shape his belief system, which is at odds with other characters in the show, which is kind of the great thing behind all this. We have Kate Siegel, who is actually director Mike Flanigan's wife, a very beautiful woman here. She plays Erin Green, and she is a divorced woman who's back on Crockett's Island, came back and her family is now gone, passed away. She's pregnant with a baby from her ex-husband, and also is the former flame of Riley Flynn, as just mentioned here. that character. So they have a little bit of history together. She has her own belief system on all sorts of things regarding God and religion and Christianity and the afterlife and heaven and things of that nature, which are at odds with Riley's belief system, and again at odds with some other people here on the island. We have a wonderful actor here named Samantha Sloyan, who plays Bev Keane. And this is the character who is just super deeply religious. She helps run the church services as well as one of the teachers on the island. And she is the character that you just kind of want to like have somebody smack in the face at some point, because she is so one-minded about how the worldview should be. And if you're not on her side of things, then she has, no use for you and believes that you are a heathen, that type of person. Very deeply religious, strong convictions, and goes against a lot of other characters in the show because of those beliefs. We have Rahul Kohli, I guess that's pronounced, to play Sheriff Hassan. He is the sheriff on the island, but in yet another character twist here, he is Muslim. And so we have a Muslim sheriff who is operating on an isolated island of Christianity with the St. Patrick's Church and all the people that go there. He has a son in the show, and he has his own interesting history and belief system. He's lost his wife. He and his son move here basically to find the most isolated place for reasons that come up in the show. But he has landed here as well, taking the job because it is so far away from everybody else in the world, and trying to find a nice, quiet community to live in. Spoiler, that doesn't necessarily go as he thought it would go in more ways than one. We have Annabeth Gish, who I was excited to see back in this show once I got into it. I loved Annabeth from The X-Files, as she was kind of the Scully replacement towards the latter couple of seasons. Robert Patrick was kind of the Mulder replacement towards the end. And then we had, Scully and Mulder, Gillian Anderson and David Duchovny, along with Annabeth Gish, and that was Agent Reyes. And then also Robert Patrick, who was Agent Doggett, I believe his name was. Surprised I pulled that up. There it is. She plays Dr. Sarah Gunning in this show, and she's the doctor. She is a lady of science and runs the minor processes she can out of her house, basically house calls and minor, blood tests and checking up for, the typical colds or things you'd go to like a walk-in clinic for, more or less is what she handles on the island. And if somebody has a more serious condition, then they would go on the ferry to the mainland and receive help from one of the bigger cities there. She also has a mom who suffers from dementia, probably Alzheimer's disease, it appears in the show, and really interesting plot lines happen with these two characters as well. And as the woman of science, she also has her own beliefs on, what life means and what the human body does when it dies, etc. And so we have all these worldviews coming together into this show and making a real melting pot of what people believe in. Now, most of the people on the island are Christian, follow the church that is there, but we have all these interesting characters who are the main characters here that have different views, not only from the church on the island, but also from each other as well. And so that creates some conflict here and there, but between a lot of different characters, not just the ones you'd assume. Then our last character here I'm going to highlight, although there's probably maybe 10 or 15 that are the main characters and secondary characters, is Hamish Linklater, who plays Father Paul. Father Paul is that mysterious priest from the one-line synopsis who comes to the island, and he's there to replace Monsignor Pruitt, who was the old, very elderly, aging, probably signs of dementia as well, priest that the island has had forever. And he comes after Monsignor Pruitt is no longer able to come back to the island. He goes on a pilgrimage, and this guy comes back to take the parish at St. Patrick's in the meantime until Monsignor Pruitt is able to come back. And his energy, his beliefs, his, what do I want to say here, charismatic personality, I guess, are able to win some other people over to the church. And church attendance starts to fluctuate and then eventually grow due to some things that happen in the church. All right, some symbolism and themes in this show. As mentioned here several times, this is a deeply religious show. Now I'll go on record as saying I don't necessarily enjoy when they use religion as a plot point, especially if it's the main plot point. I think it's fine for people to have their own religious convictions and belief systems, whether you are atheist or agnostic or Christian or Muslim or Hindu or Buddha or whatever, But when the plot is necessarily about that point, then that's something I'm usually not as intrigued by. As a matter of fact, I like to watch horror movies as well. And when you get into the ones that are really based on religion, those are generally ones that I don't care as much for either, just because religion is kind of this system where we have beliefs, which are great. But when people have like lack of beliefs or cherry pick from those beliefs to then create a story from, or a scary story from, with demons or exorcists or whatever the case may be, it just feels like they're kind of using people's beliefs then as like a plot beginning point. And that usually does not intrigue me as much. I'm not saying it's bad when they have that as the plot, but for me, it usually doesn't capture my attention, I guess is what I'm trying to say here. But in this show, again, obviously very religious overtones we have here, and definitely questions of faith and what happens when we die. And some people really go into some vivid details about what they believe that is like, that experience of when your body takes its last breath, and during that moment and then afterwards, what that's like for you. Faith for different people, not only in religion and not only in the afterlife, which has already been mentioned, but also, what does your faith and your religion look like in your day-to-day life? How does it project itself when you're talking to your neighbor, or when you're having a community or social function, or when you're looking down upon somebody who maybe doesn't A, share the same values as you, or, B, lives their life in such a way that would be kind of against what you think of when you think of your belief system. So there actually was some kind of interesting plot points here because of faith and religion in this, which I was hesitant about, but actually worked fairly well in the show. There are some symbols here as well in this show, most of which I will not spoil necessarily because I don't want to, again, spoil too much of this show. So for a little bit of plot summary, and again, I'm going to do this with just the lightest of all spoilers and not, ruin anything at all that happens later in this show, or what the major things are here. But this was a show that, as I figured, had more than meets the eye. The kind of trailer for this shows that there is some creepiness on this island of some sort, but what is it? And there's some interesting events that happen in kind of the first episode or two, involving a creature sighting that is on Crockett's Island and the couple areas around the island that really are kind of scary as the watcher, and definitely to the people in the show on the island as well. As mentioned, we have this town's old priest that disappears. He goes on a pilgrimage back to the Holy Land, and his replacement again is this kind of young Father Paul guy who has some interesting new ideas to get people into the church. But somebody finds out that he has an odd resemblance, a little uncanny, if you will, to the old priest, Monsignor Pruitt, when Pruitt was young. They look somewhat alike. And so that's kind of odd, and people pick up on that as well. We do have the creature, as I mentioned, that's going to show up in this show. And again, you kind of, not spoilering here, but you spoiling, I guess. You assume that a creature is going to follow this path, this flow chart, if you will, through a supernatural show. And this one kind of goes in a different direction. That's all I'm going to say on this one. Your preconceived notions of what you might guess when you see the creature start to show up may not be what actually is here in this show. This is a religious show, and I don't think it's too spoilery to say that there are miracles that happen in this show. This is again dealing with faith and things that happen here on the island. We have early in this show, now this is not giving away too much for the ending or the second half of the show again, I don't think, but we have a character I mentioned in the trailer who is in a wheelchair, and she was the victim of a hunting accident that goes wrong, and her ability to get out of that wheelchair is a major plot point early in the show because there's a miracle that's performed. Spoiler for this part, she's healed, but that's basically the impetus for people to begin going to St. Patrick's more and more frequently because of the miracle that happens. And so people start to recommit themselves to the faith, those that hadn't gone in a while, and even those who may have had different worldviews before are curious about this religion now at St. Patrick's. Okay, and eventually we get other mysterious events that happen towards the second half of this show, maybe episodes 5, 6, 7 as it goes on. Goes in some directions I really didn't see it going. It's kind of intriguing. And, it wasn't until real late in the show that we got the question I had by about episode 3, which is, why is this show called Midnight Mass? So something to ponder there. Okay, overall, this is a show that only has 7 episodes. So if you're intrigued by just spending maybe, a week's worth of time on one show, there's a lot to get here. The amount of self-discovery and self-journey for the characters in this show, I feel like is high. People who had a certain belief system early in the show may change it as it goes on. And that could be belief in relationships with others, belief in God, belief in the afterlife, belief in what it means to be faithful, belief in your community. A lot of people will really change as this show goes on. And the emotions in this show are really well done as well. I, as the viewer, definitely went on emotional highs with these characters and emotional lows with these characters. The events that happen in the plot were done for plot reasons, but I, as the viewer, felt like there were real stakes in this show. There were times where, I found myself getting a little emotional, which is kind of surprising for a show based on supernatural things and also religion, which I said is not necessarily my cup of tea when it comes to shows and movies. So there was stakes, as I said, in this show. Characters will live and characters are going to die as the show goes on. Which characters those are may surprise you as well. They did me as the show goes through. So the ending of this show, here's the thing. A lot of shows, and I've seen this complaint in other places and from other people as well, but a lot of shows build this world, build a plot, and then are unable to really find a satisfying way to finish that plot due to resolution for characters or plot devices that they've used. They built themselves into a hole that it can't really be fixed, or whatever the case may be. I do think that this show ends in a very satisfying way. And that's all I'm going to really say on that, I guess. I did not think after episode 6 that episode 7 could possibly live up to be satisfying for me. And I admit that I was wrong about that. It had some emotional impacts. It hit me, and I was surprised how hard it hit me that last episode. It was really unexpected for me to have the emotional reaction that I had to this. I don't quite think it brought me to tears for different reasons. That'll be seen in the show, but I think I was real sniffly close as this went on. So we'll see what happens here if you give the show a watch. All right, so conclusion today. This is a short mini episode here again, of friends occasionally not disagreeing. I'm going to give this show a final rating of 8 out of 10. It wasn't perfect. but it was very, very, very good. I wouldn't use the word love, but I would say really liked for sure. If you have a week to devote to a new show, if you're in at all to things about religion and or supernatural things, or even just drama on this, I do recommend you give this show a shot. I don't recall there really being much in terms of comedy. Might be like a single chuckle here or there in a couple episodes, but not much here if you're a comedy fan. But if you are into it all, supernatural, you know, questioning our beliefs in life and what it means and where we go afterwards, and just even really seeing good dynamics between characters in a show. This is something that you're probably going to enjoy. And as mentioned, I'm extremely choosy with the shows I watch. I don't watch a lot of shows, through the years. I've never seen so many of the famous ones: Arrested Development, Breaking Bad, Community, Parks and Rec. You can just go on and on and on and on and on. West Wing, Sopranos. You can name 1,000 shows I haven't seen in the last 20 years, and maybe 24 shows I have seen in the last 20 years. So I'm extremely picky when I devote time to a TV show, which is, again, not very often, but I'm going to recommend this for anybody who wants to take a peek. It's free if you have Netflix. Obviously, it's on there. Like I said, it only runs about 7 hours with credits. So check out Midnight Mass if you are at all interested in a new show for the next week here. All right, as this episode comes out, this will be after a stream of new ones we've had coming up here. We do have a couple more for you coming up in the future. We're going to be tackling Stranger Things, obviously, here for season 4. When that wraps up, for me watching it, I think the other people are already done with it as this episode comes out. So I will get to my last episodes and then probably finish that up. Have some future episodes up here as well. Probably Miss Marvel at some point in the future as well. I'm a little behind. I haven't started that yet, but I know some of the other gents are watching that at the moment. So we'll get to that. And then at some point here, we'll have our celebration episode. It was supposed to be episode 25, but it's probably going to be a little bit behind that. For our anniversary episode, we said we would rank the entirety of the MCU movies, and we'll find a way to do that so it's not like a 10-part episode. I'm thinking of maybe like a hosts are allowed 2 sentences per movie type rule or something like that. But that'll put us somewhere in the mid to late 20s by the time we get to that episode, which is impressive because we've been doing one of these a week. And when we kind of had fun starting this, the other hosts and I, we had some ideas. We jumped into this kind of learning how to do a podcast and not really knowing entirely what we were in for, but it has become a wonderful thing where I get to see some of my friends that I don't always see, and we have you all hear our audio, but we're on camera on Zoom with each other as we're here talking and hosting these episodes and discussing things. So it's nice. I get to see people that I don't typically see because really only one of the other hosts is local enough that I see him in person. So the rest of the people, basically, I see once, maybe twice a year if I'm lucky, and then I see them as we host these things. So we've really enjoyed doing these episodes. I hope you all enjoy them as well. Again, if you like us, give us a like on Facebook, share our page to your friends if you can. If you think they're interested in any of our topics that we do: true crime, supernatural, cryptozoology, comic books, television, movies, Star Wars, Marvels, anything in between, music, countdowns, comparisons. We've been doing a little bit of everything, which was kind of our focus for format on this podcast. And hopefully you've enjoyed. So, like us, share us, help us grow this audience and get out to some more people out there as well. If you're a listener and we don't know about you, drop us a comment on Facebook. Let us know that you listen and what you like, because we don't always know who's really out there necessarily either. We see some raw statistics, but that's really about all we see as far as connection to our viewers at this point. We're thinking about getting a dedicated TikTok up as well, because I know one of our hosts, Brett, runs a TikTok, and he does a little clip for us every week that he puts up on his own. And I run a TikTok as well for my political vlog, but I don't have one for this, but we're thinking of adding that as well as just another way to expose ourselves to more people in our audience. So I thank you all for stopping with me here to check out the review of Midnight Mass, just a little mini half episode here for us. And I guess that's it. So I'm by myself here. So I'm going to take this out as a religious Midnight Mass song to finish us up here today. Friends occasionally not disagree. We'll see you next time, everybody, on Friends Occasionally Not Disagreeing. Take care.